Well, surprise, surprise. It's looking more and more like the Trudeau government used the Emergencies Act to crush the Freedom Convoy purely out of political interest. Here's the headline, and this is from SpencerFernando.com. Trudeau government planned to demonize Freedom Convoy as extremist before it even arrived in Ottawa. And it says further confirmation the Liberals were never acting in good faith. It says, as we know, the Liberal government and much of the establishment media were desperate to cast the Freedom Convoy as Canada's January 6th. This stemmed in part from the fact that many in this country filter every event through the lens of the United States, and from the fact that the Liberal government clearly felt they could benefit from it politically. Now, as for this filtering every event through the lens of the United States, yes, the Canadian media absolutely does that, and it filters down to the people. And the Canadian media takes a very keen interest in what's happening politically in the United States. And it's always through a very left-wing filter. Every expert that they have on to talk about it is from the New York Times or the Washington Post. It's always somebody very far on the left and very committed to establishment Democrat politics. And this, of course, gives Canadians a very skewed view of American politics. And so it's no surprise that they would want to cast the Freedom Convoy as Canada's January 6th. But anyway, it says also, if Canadians perceived the Freedom Convoy as an insurrection, the Liberals would be able to further expand government power. It says we could see them trying to will their fantasy into reality, with Trudeau using purposefully divisive rhetoric and the Liberals almost goading convoy participants into more and more aggressive actions. We saw stories about protesters trying to light an apartment building on fire, and later on it turns out suspect charged in downtown Ottawa arson last month, not connected with the Freedom Convoy. And of course, this is after the protest. This is after the Emergencies Act. We saw this from Bernie Farber, who's chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, which receives funds from the Trudeau government, by the way. He said, taken by a friend in Ottawa at the occupation, apparently in plain sight. And this is an anti-Semitic leaflet. Unfortunately, it's a picture that was taken before the Freedom Convoy in Miami and had nothing to do with Ottawa. In fact, this was just not true. Anyway, it didn't work, and the Freedom Convoy did not become violent. And it says that when that didn't work, the Liberals decided to use the Emergencies Act anyway, likely believing that using emergency powers would convince many Canadians that it must have been an emergency situation. And I think, sadly, it did work. Not for everybody, of course, but I think there was a element of Canada that actually liked seeing that authoritarian overreach. Let's move to this story from True North, and the story by Andrew Lawton. It says, in a discussion between key aides in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's and Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino's offices, Mendicino, Director of Communications, warned against the statements that might compel Freedom Convoy organizers to push out the crazies. The damning text messages were released Monday morning by the Public Order Emergency Commission. And that is the commission which is mandatory by law, that is inquiring into whether there was sufficient cause for Trudeau to enact the Emergencies Act. Now, in these messages, Prime Minister's Office issues and Policy Advisor, Mary Liz Power, and Alexander Cohen of Mendicino's office discuss ways to best exploit the narrative being peddled by the media outlets about extreme elements in the convoy. Wow, it's almost as if the Trudeau government and the media have similar goals. Weird. Says, got quick responses. People are into it. Let me know if your boss is too. Happy to help however I can. This is what I sent through, by the way. Hi, I just had a chat with Alex at PS, I'm guessing that's at Public Safety, who had a bit of an interesting idea. As you saw in the Pod Goals chat, the truckers' convoy and some of their more extreme comments, i.e. calling for a January 6th style insurrection. So I guess that must be what they were bringing the bouncy castles for, the insurrection. But anyway, are getting more coverage in media. Alex was surveying whether there'd be interest in his boss doing some media on this eventually. He was chatting with Mendicino about it right before he went into cabinet retreat. I think there could be an opportunity to get in on this growing narrative of the truckers, particularly with the research that LRB is doing. LRB is Liberal Research Bureau, which is not part of the federal government. It's part of the Liberal Party. It serves Trudeau. But anyway, particularly with the research that LRB is doing into their backers. My thoughts on the framing here would be similar to what the PM Blair said last year when January 6th occurred. Our democracy is something we need to nurture and protect every day. And what better way to do that than to lie about political dissenters, obviously. Alexander Cohen of Marco Mendicino's office says Mendicino is supportive but doesn't want to come down too hard or the Freedom Convoy might push out the crazies. In other words, the federal government wanted extreme voices in the protest to keep criticizing them. We will always support the right to peaceful protest. Some of the calls that organizers of these events are making are concerning, and we're taking them seriously. Would need something to back this up. Oh, you mean like evidence? Evidence that doesn't exist? Yeah, you might want something to back that up. Or maybe you don't, because, when you've got every teleprompter reader with their hand out for subsidies from the government, maybe you don't need that. Anyway, we'll continue to monitor the situation closely. The fine line to walk would be to ensure we are not looking like we're directing the police, which obviously is not the goal here. Hoping to canvass your thoughts. Alex said he'd come back to me with a proposal this afternoon when he gets to chat with Mendicino again. Obviously pending his boss's and our interest in looking into this further. Thanks. I had an initial chat with my boss and he's supportive, but wants to wait a day or two. There's a danger that if we come down too hard, they might push out the crazies. I think that's fair. Apparently Global, that's Global News, and others are working on stories. Maybe we should see how those land. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Their first concern is the narrative and politics. Incredible. Anyway, he ends this thread with, to put a fine point on this, the Prime Minister and Minister of Public Safety were focused not on any threat posed by the convoy, but on the narrative. Well, that does sound like the Trudeau Liberals, I gotta say. Anyway, please subscribe, like, and share. Sharing really helps me out. I thank you for doing that. I will see you next time.